Any of the money that was for during COVID, we didn't give out any grants in during 2021. And so we had a quite substantial amount of grants awarded last year. We're gonna have about half of that money this year. So just beware when you're doing your applications, don't be upset. Well, you got so much last year, this year is gonna be slim. We have a new, Decker Technologies is gonna help us, we're told there's 700 STRs out there that, and we're only collecting on 250 of them. So we're, hopefully we'll get, receive more taxes in and, we'll get that started in October. And then we may be back up to what we were, next year. But for this year, just be aware, don't get upset. We'll give you what we have, but it's gonna be probably half as much. And but I'll let you
Okay,
take it away.
sure.
And
Yeah. So hopefully we will see a lot more hotel tax revenues flowing in. Those short-term rentals are always so difficult to collect taxes from. And just remember, the hotel taxes are governed locally, right? So unlike where you have sales tax money and the comptroller of the state of Texas collects on behalf of the cities and counties. And then gives that money back to the cities and counties. That's not the case with hotel taxes. These ladies are responsible for having to collect all of those hotel tax dollars from all 700 short-term rentals across the county. So you can see what a challenge that is. Thanks for coming. First of all, I'm Justin Bregel. I'm General Counsel for the Texas Hotel and Lodging Association. You all see me at that annual county commissioners meeting that we, attend right here in this room. And so many of you all apply for hotel tax funds. And what we thought would be helpful, we do this a lot for cities and counties across the state of Texas. In advance of those meetings and then at those meetings, we get so many questions about hotel taxes that we thought it would be a good idea that in advance of that meeting, let's convene a meeting with y'all and answer any questions you may have about hotel taxes. So you can work on your applications for hot funding and tune them in such a way that you're in compliance with the law. And really, it's maybe more of a formal process, a rubber stamp, if you will, when you come before county commissioners. I'm going to talk today about the law for hotel taxes. The county commissioners at that meeting, we'll be back here in this room in a few months, are going to actually decide on your grant applications. I don't decide your grant applications. I just help with the legal aspects of them. But this is an opportunity for you to ask your questions about the hotel tax law. We can help you all, with your applications to make sure that that legally speaking, the nuts and bolts are all in place. So I'm going to talk about the two-part test under the tax code. Have any questions you all may have? Don't hesitate to ask. I'm here to help you all in any way we certainly can. I'm gonna like to make this as informal as possible. But again, thank you for being here today. So let's talk about hotel taxes, sort of where they come from, why we have this two-part test. So hotel taxes there's really three hotel occupancy taxes to think about. There's the state 6% hotel tax, right? That applies to every lodging property in the state of Texas. It's the oldest of the hotel taxes, dates back to 1959 when the state of Texas at that point initially imposed a 3%. Now it's 6% hotel tax. Every lodging property, and we're talking about hotels. I say the word hotels, but for tax code purposes, we're talking about any building that's rented out for less than 30 days for overnight accommodations, right? So whether we're talking about a hotel that we have on right on the strip, or if we're talking about say a short-term rental on one of the lakes, right? Those are all hotels for hotel tax purposes. Any hotel that's that rents rooms for less than 30 days is going to collect the state 6% hotel tax. That money goes to the state of Texas, and you never see that money again. Well, you do, but never directly, right? That goes to fund all of the things that the state of Texas does, right? Public education, tax dot, DPS, all those things, right? But there are local hotel taxes too, and that's why we're here. There's a city hotel tax, if you're within the city limits of, say, the city of Llano, there's a city hotel occupancy tax, that rate is 7%. And if you are outside of the city of Llano, there is a Llano County hotel occupancy tax, that's a 4% rate. Your neighboring counties, some of them have a similar tax, Burnett County, for example, they have their own tax as well. But as I mentioned earlier, those local taxes are collected and administered locally. So the county commissioners will decide how those hotel tax dollars are spent. And chapters 351 and 352 of the tax code govern how a city or county may spend hotel tax revenue. So when you're filling out your applications, when you're applying for hotel tax revenue, and when the county commissioners are deciding how to spend that hotel tax revenue, we all have to comply with the tax code, with the legislature, the Texas legislature has set forth for how to spend hotel tax revenue. All right, so if you're applying for $1 of hotel tax revenue, you have to ensure that the thing you want to spend that hotel tax revenue on complies with a two-part test in the tax code. The first part of that two-part test is a long sentence. Every expenditure must directly promote and enhance tourism and the hotel and convention industry. All right, long sentence. Sorry about that, the legislature, they're worried. Every expenditure, not some, not most, right? Every dollar that the county doles out of hotel tax revenue has to comply with this two-part test. Every expenditure must directly promote tourism and the hotel and convention industry. That word directly is really important. I'll give you a story here, an old story of mine. I've been doing this job a very, very long time. Been doing this for 17 years. When I was new in this job, I was a new lawyer. I went out to a city in West Texas and I went to a city council meeting, spent the night in a hotel, came back to Austin the next day. A week or two later, the mayor called me up and said, Justin, thanks for coming. When you spent the night at the hotel in our town, you remember if you tasted the drinking water? I said, I don't remember, Mayor. He said, well, then you didn't. Because you would remember, when we ask people what they like and don't like about visiting our town, they always complain that our water tastes really bad. And we know that hotel guests would appreciate a new water treatment plant. So we want to use some hotel tax dollars for our new water treatment plant because the hotels will benefit from that. Can we do it? We all are laughing. You know the answer to that question, right? No, that's not a direct promotion of tourism in the hotel and convention industry. We can look at it a different way. Would anybody come and spend a night in that town because they have a new water treatment plant? No. Right? So what is a direct promotion of tourism and hotel activity? Well, it's promoting those events and activities where tourists and hotel guests are likely to come and attend, right? Maybe it's that festival that you want to organize and put on, right? And tourists and hotel guests will attend. Maybe it's advertising that event, right? A lot of y'all do a lot of advertising with hotel tax dollars to try and bring people to the area, maybe get them to come back again in the future, right? Maybe it's funding that arts event, maybe it's a sporting event, right? But the thing we are spending the money on needs to have a connection between the expenditure of that hot revenue and people who are spending the night. Or as we say in the law, there needs to be a nexus, a connection, right? So when you're going through your applications, think about your connection between how you want to spend that dollar of hotel tax money and how it's going to impact tourism and hotel activity. Okay, so I always refer to myself as a double scumbag. I'm a scumbag lawyer and I'm a scumbag lobbyist. I represent the hotel industry. If you're in the hotel industry, I'm your scumbag. I'm happy to work for you. I spent a lot of time at the Capitol working on hotel tax legislation during the legislative session. We worked with Llano County many years ago now to get Llano County's hotel tax revenue through the legislative process. We worked with Llano County last legislative session to allow the county to use some hotel tax money to hire Deckard, right? This is what we do. And every legislative session, I think there's proposals to use hotel tax revenue for new things. And I always get pulled into some meeting with some staffer, and they ask this question. They say, Justin, why are hotels so greedy? And sometimes they put a word before greedy. Why does your industry always ask us to maintain this standard, right? This requirement that every expenditure directly promote tourism in the hotel and convention industry. Remember, we're talking about public dollars, tax dollars, right? Why do we have this standard? Well, the hotel tax was always a compromise. You haven't spent the night in a hotel in Texas in a while. I hope you'll change that soon. But when you do spend the night in a hotel in Texas, you will notice that the tax rate you pay is pretty high. Right, in our cities, it's about 13%. In our bigger cities, it's as high as 19%. 19%? Are you kidding me? 19%? Double the sales tax, more than double the sales tax, almost double the sales tax, depending on where we are. That's a really high rate to pay, particularly in a state where we pride ourselves on being a low tax state, right? That's what we always say. Yeah, turn the Texas. We don't pay much tax here. Unless you're staying at a hotel. But it might surprise you that our industry, by and large, is okay with that high tax rate. And the reason why we're okay with that high tax rate is that these dollars go towards promoting tourism and hotel activity. The idea here is this is an economic engine. I'm looking at all of you and I'm thinking about all of the events you all put on every year, right? The things you give back to your community to make Llano County a nicer place to live, a nicer place to visit. That's the idea here with these hotel tax dollars. Directly promoting tourism and hotel activity because these people are coming to your community and they're spending a lot of money and they're propping up a lot of businesses. They're contributing sales tax dollars to your community, paying for public education, employing people. That's the whole point of the hotel tax. It's an economic development tax. Okay, I'm off my soapbox. Every expenditure must directly promote tourism, the hotel and convention industry. You've heard this boiled down to a very, very simple sentence. You're gonna ask, why did I spend so long? Does it put heads in beds? Have you heard that phrase before? Yeah, economic activity area hotels, more than just heads in beds, but that's the idea, right? Does this somehow impact people spending the night in a hotel? Remember, a hotel in Llano County. So as you're going through your application with the county and you're applying for those dollars of hotel taxes, think about how many tourists and hotel guests are likely to come and attend that event, or likely come to your visitor center, or come to, whatever it is, right? Think about that. Your advertising, how many tourists and hotel guests are likely to come and see that advertisement and likely to come to the area. That's what you're going to want to demonstrate. If you're putting on a festival, think about, in addition to the people that are coming to the festival, your vendors, right? The people that are supplying your festival, the people that are exhibiting there, right? If you're running like something like a museum, what about your visitors log, right? If you just want advertising, a lot of billboards, we always, you see all those applications for billboards, right, Cheryl? Every set, Sunday cycle. How many people are likely to see that? How many people do you think are going to be visitors to your area? This is what we need to be thinking about when we're talking about hotel taxes. And let's talk for just a second about what we mean by tourists and hotel guests. A tourist is defined as somebody visiting from another city or another town, right? So that's a tourist. That's under the tax code's definition. That's a pretty broad definition. Somebody driving over the bridge from Burnett County to Llano County, guess what? They're tourists in Llano County for the day, but we've got to promote tourism and hotel activity, and lodging activity, right? So start thinking about it, or if you can, start thinking about it in those terms, and what that means. People visiting Llano County from outside the area. Right? In Llano County, the commissioners are pretty stringent too. This is an internal policy that they tend to have. Remember, the cities and the counties can be more restrictive on their rules for hotel taxes than what the state law is. I'm talking about state law here but the county commissioners can set additional standards and rules for what they're going to approve a grant for. Some of these commissioners that typically sit behind where I'm standing typically have pretty stringent standards when it comes to spending hotel tax dollars on events and activities that are outside of the city of Llano. That's an internal policy that they tend to have. And their theory behind this is that, the city of Llano has its own hotel occupancy tax. And you can apply for hotel tax funding from the city of Llano. You could apply for hotel tax funding from Llano County. You could apply for both. But what the county commissioners tend to like to see is how many people are spending the night outside of the city of Llano, because those are the dollars and tax dollars that flow into this entity right here, right? So think about that too as you're doing your application. Now, some of you are outside of the city limits, pretty far outside of the city limits, so that's going to be pretty natural, right? An event at Castell is going to involve a lot of county-related activity. But if your event's in the city of Llano, it doesn't mean you can't apply for funding. But start thinking about the level of tourism activity and hotel activity you're attracting from folks that are outside the area. And remember this too, particularly if you're talking about an event. Your event does not have to be the sole reason why somebody came and spent the night in Llano County for that time period, right? They could be there for some other reason, right? Aqua Boom's a good example, right? Aqua Boom, if people want to come out for the 4th of July, they want to get out of the city, they want to spend some time on the lakes in the hill country, right? They're going to attend Aqua Boom probably if they're in the area, right? I would want to. I want to see those fireworks. I want to see, all the events that are occurring in that area. So maybe that's not the sole reason why I rented a lake house that weekend, right? But I'm still having an impact. And so I'm going to count all of those folks that are attending Aqua Boom as having an impact on tourism and hotel activity on what I'm doing in my application. You're going to do the same thing in your applications as well. Okay, so our expenditure must directly promote tourism in the hotel and convention industry. 2, we've got to fit that expenditure into one of the categories that are available to us in the tax code. Right, so you will see on the application, what category does it fit in? We'll talk about every category, some in more depth than others. The first category is convention centers and visitor information centers. Well, convention centers are the original category. The city of Dallas in the 1960s wanted to build its first convention center. They're the first city that got to impose a city hotel occupancy tax. Counties were added about a decade later, right? It remains really important, right? If you're in a bigger city or even a mid-sized city, building a convention center to host meetings involving tourists and hotel guests is sometimes vitally important for your economy, right? We're working on the Austin Convention Center expansion right now. We're going to spend $1 billion in the city of Austin to tear down the convention center, close it for 4 years, and then rebuild the thing. Oh my God, $1 billion. But that's really important to the Austin economy, to the tourism economy, right? Hotel tax dollars are going to go for that convention center expansion, destruction and then rebuilding and expansion, right? But for your community in that category, what's probably more relevant is the visitor information center aspect of it. So if you run a chamber, nonprofit, you're part of a governmental entity, you can apply for hotel tax funding for a visitor information center. A visitor information center is a building or a portion of the building that's used to disseminate information to tourists and visitors, right? So you may want to establish a visitor information center, and there are a number of them that typically the county gives funding to, right? Lake Buchanan Chamber, for example, they've got the visitor information center up there by the dam. They apply for hotel tax funding pretty regularly. Kingsland Chamber typically also applies for hotel tax funding under the visitor information center category. And so really a vitally important aspect of tourism promotion. So you'll see that category as well. That visitor information center can be owned by a city government or a county government, but it doesn't have to be. It can be owned by a nonprofit. It can be owned by a chamber of commerce, as I mentioned. It can be owned by some other type of entity. And in addition to paying for the building costs and the costs associated with printing up maps and brochures and all the rest, we can pay for the staffing of that visitor information center, or at least a portion of the staffing that's attributable to the aspects of that visitor center that are used as a visitor center, right? So we can use hotel tax revenue to do that category. That's category 1. Category 2 is real simple. A convention delegates or registration of convention delegates. If you've got a big convention or conference in your community, you need to pay people to be able to work to get people registered for that convention. You can use hotel tax revenue for that purpose as well. Probably not very applicable to Llano County, but it is available. Category 3, though, is going to be really relevant, I think, probably to everyone. Advertising and promotion. You may use hotel tax revenue, or the county may use hotel tax revenue to advertise and promote both the county overall as a tourism destination, but then also individual events and activities as tourism destinations, right? So in this category, the county may decide that it wants to contract with maybe some sort of entity that's going to be the designated marketing organization for the county. It's going to build sort of a branding campaign for Visit Llano County, Visit the Highland Lakes, etc. Right? They could do that. But then you individually, those of you who represent or are involved with individual organizations that are applying for hotel tax funds, you can apply for hotel tax funding under this category to advertise your particular event, advertise your attraction, whatever it is, right? So, if you're putting on a festival, for example, you may want to apply for hotel tax funds to pay for the costs associated with hosting that festival. But as important to that will be applying for hotel tax funds to advertise that festival, pay for those billboards, the print media, right? The web presence, all of those things. You can use hotel tax revenue under the advertising category. We really like this category from our industry's perspective for a couple of reasons. One, we tend to get the most return on investment for this category, right? We tend to see the most amount of return of people visiting to the area when we spend on this category. But then two, I like this category just as a hotel tax lawyer because, we may have a festival or an event that can't itself qualify for hotel tax funds because it doesn't fit within one of these categories, but we can almost always use hotel tax revenue to advertise and promote that activity, right? And the number of you in this room really make a lot of use of this category, do a lot of advertising and promotion in this category. And I really think that's a wonderful thing. I really think that builds the brand, builds the word that people should come to Llano County. You're well situated, right? You're not far from Austin. You're not far from San Antonio. You're not really far from the DFW area, right? Trying to attract people from these areas, get them to come back summer after summer or off season after off season, whatever it is. This is how we're going to do it. Now, I'm going to talk about a minimum expenditure associated with this category on the city side, because I think some of you also may apply for hotel tax funding from the city of Llano. This minimum expenditure does not apply to the county, but it does apply to the city. Cities in Texas must spend at least 1% of their rate on this particular category. So for the city of Llano, for example, city of Llano levies a 7% hotel tax. At least 1/7, so 1% of that 7%, 1/7 of the amount of money that the city of Llano takes in every year in hotel tax money, at least that amount must be spent on advertising the city of Llano as a tourism destination. 1 divided by 7 is about 14.2%, right? So a little over 14% of the city of Llano's hotel tax budget. That's the minimum that has to be spent on advertising and promoting Llano as a tourism destination. That minimum doesn't apply to Llano County. Counties don't have that minimum threshold. But again, if you're one of those entities that's applying for hotel tax funding from a variety of governmental entities, keep that in mind, or at least just be aware that that's the case for cities. Okay, any questions so far? We talked about 3 categories. Yes, sir.
Okay, and you're talking about the advertising, you went over events and those things that attract, but can a B&B use tax money for advertising?
Sure, they certainly can. It's going to be up to the county and the commissioners to decide whether or not they want to approve that. But if you're asking me, from a legal perspective, is it allowable for a B&B or any other type of lodging property to use hotel tax dollars to advertise and promote stuff? Sure, right? Remember, what are we trying to advertise? We're advertising events and activities and businesses in Llano County that are that attract tourists and hotel guests to the area, right? So a bed and breakfast, of course, they're going to attract tourists and hotel guests to the area. That's their whole point, right? So yes, those entities may apply for hotel tax funding. Now, I said, it's up to the county commissioners, and it is. And one thing that they are going to want to consider is that if they engage in this policy of giving hotel tax revenue to the individual lodging operators to advertise and promote them as a tourism destination, just because they can, they may want to have a discussion about whether or not they should, because when they do it for one, they're going to open up that door then for all of these entities to come and apply for hotel tax funding grants, right? So that's going to be a consideration that if I were a commissioner, I would be thinking about. I may not say no, but I'm going to think about how I want to be able to manage that, right? But yes, that's a great question. And some cities and counties do that. They have a program that enables the lodging properties to participate in an advertising campaign program with hotel tax funds. It's certainly allowable under the law. Any other questions about this category?
How about tiny homes?
How about tiny homes? Are you question about whether or not tiny homes, the tax applies to them?
Yeah.
Yes, the tax will apply to a tiny home. It's considered a structure, right? But we can riff off of that though and talk about some other examples, right? I get this.
What if the tiny home has wheels?
Okay, so that's where I was gonna go. What if the tiny home has wheels? If the tiny home is registered as a vehicle under the Texas Transportation Code, it is not going to be subject to the county hotel tax. It will be subject to the motor vehicle rental tax, though, right? So you'll have to keep that in consideration, that the state of Texas is gonna want some money from you regardless. But the tiny homes in that situation, if they're on wheels, if they're, you know, they're vehicles, then they're not gonna be subject to hotel taxes. And let me think about talking about some other examples too, right? Cabins, yes, subject to hotel tax revenue. You know, lake houses, yes, subject to hotel tax revenue. What about a yurt, right? A tent, basically a fancy tent with air conditioning, not subject to hotel tax. What about the rental of an RV hookup, right? A parking space essentially in a campground and hookups, not subject to hotel occupancy taxes, right? You know, they're just not, and that's something that the code is always held, right? But if we're talking about a building rented out for less than 30 days, it is gonna be subject to hotel taxes. And so if you think, you know, on the other side of the county line, but Inks Lake, right, the state park over there. They've got those shelters, you know, in addition to campsites that they rent. And even though we're talking about state property, we're talking about the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department's property here. Those structures, those shelters that they rent, they're subject to the county hotel tax over there. So just that's how it works. It's kind of interesting how it's evolved over the years. All right, let's talk about the other categories. You can use hotel tax revenue for arts related events and activities. So the tax code has a list of forms of art that are allowable to receive hotel tax funding. The most common ones we see are going to be things like live music, right? So that's going to be probably important to some of your events and activities. Other performances, right? So maybe it's a play or a musical, something along those lines. Visual arts, painting, sculpture, so maybe a mural, something else along those lines, right? You can use hotel tax revenue to pay for the costs associated with putting on that arts related event and activity. So if you've got a festival, for example, and you're gonna hire some bands to come and perform at that festival, and you think that when you have that live music event at your event, right, you're going to attract people from outside the area, you can use hotel tax revenue, the county can use hotel tax revenue to pay for the costs associated with hosting that event, right? Bring the bands in, bring in the equipment for the band, security, all those things associated with it. We can use hotel tax revenue for that live music event, right? So this arts category is really important for a lot of communities because, you know, music is really, you know, big on a lot of these festivals. Maybe other types of art too, but that's one I tend to see in smaller population counties. Again, talking about maximums and minimums, everyone talked about the minimum expenditure for cities on advertising. Well, if you're one of those entities that's applying for hotel tax funds from a city, doesn't apply to the county, but if you're applying for a city, there's a limit on what the amount of money that's available for arts in a city. It's 15% of the annual hotel tax revenue. So if you're in the city of Llano, you're applying for an arts hotel tax funds for arts to the city of Llano, the most they can give is 15% of their total arts budget, right? So if the city of Llano collects $100,000 in hotel tax revenue in the fiscal year, the most they can approve for all the arts combined would be $15,000, 15% of their total hotel tax budget. So again, just bring it up because I know some of y'all will apply for multiple entities. All right, let's talk about the next category, historical restoration and preservation. Another really vital category. I know we've got some folks here from that apply for hotel tax funds for the historic railroad. This is going to be right up your alley, right? You may use hotel record tracks. You may use hotel tax revenue for historical restoration and preservation. Now, those terms aren't further defined in the tax code, historical restoration and preservation. So we're going to fall back on what is the ordinary meaning for those terms, historical restoration and preservation used in the community, right? So, and I say that because, so for example, the tax code does not have a requirement in place that that historical site or attraction be listed on some sort of a historic registry. It can be, but it doesn't have to be under state law. It's up to the county to decide whether or not they want to have that requirement in place. And some cities and counties do. Some cities and counties will require that that historical site be listed on maybe, you know, with the historical commission or something else along those lines. But instead, we're going to look at what does historical mean in your community. And, you know, if the county commissioners feel that, you know, reasonably speaking, the thing that they want to spend money on is historical in nature, that's fine. We're talking about restoration and preservation here though. So what do those terms tend to mean? Well, we're preserving or restoring those artifacts and things that have a historical track record, that have some sort of a either written or oral history associated with it. And I'm thinking, okay, yeah, got it, Justin. Well, what I tend to see sometimes come up is people will want to build, maybe we have a historical building, but they want to add a new annex or a new aspect that doesn't have a historical record associated with it. That's going to fit outside of the plain meaning of those words. We're preserving something that is historical in nature. And yes, as with all of these things, all the categories, we must be able to tie some sort of tourism and hotel activity associated with historical restoration and preservation. So as long as you can demonstrate historical restoration and preservation associated with your applications and tourism activity, you're going to meet the legal requirements for the tax code. There's not a requirement in the code that the entity that's applying be a nonprofit or a governmental entity. That's going to be up to the county to decide whether or not they want to have that standard associated with it. And then, as with the last category, we talked about a maximum for the arts, remember, for the city. Same thing goes with historical restoration and preservation. If you're applying for hotel tax funds from a city entity, the city can spend no more than 15% of its hotel tax budget on historical restoration and preservation. The county does not have that limitation associated with it. Yes, sir.
Okay, so we operate the Railroad Museum for the city of Llano.
Got it.
It's a service contract. They don't pay any money.
Okay.
They maintain the depot building as part of the visitor center.
Sure.
We are responsible for all the other historical items at the railroad.
Okay.
So can we apply for money for maintenance of those?
You can. So that would be the preservation part of that, right? Historical restoration and preservation, right? You need to do maintenance in order to preserve those historical artifacts. I presume you can show some level of tourism and hotel activity with your visitation associated with it, right? I would guess that a lot of people that are, in Llano, City of Llano or Llano County that are looking for something to do, they may look at come to your museum or take, if you go to operate an actual moving, equipment, they may want to go for a ride on it. You'll see it in various events and whatnot, right? So yeah, you certainly could apply for hotel tax funding. It seems to fit within that definition of historical restoration and preservation to me. I think if you're applying for a county hotel tax funding, my advice to you will be, to the extent possible, demonstrate tourism activity and hotel activity from folks that are staying outside of the city limits, because I know some of the folks that sit behind me, that's what they're going to be interested in seeing.
Well, we have electronic counters. We know
Great.
how many people visit each of the major exhibits.
Good.
We don't have people to stand around and ask you, where are you coming from and are you spending the night?
Yeah. Well, and let me build off that just a little bit. That's great, right? You're able to you have to employ other means in order to get that data and information, and that's wonderful, right? Alternatively, if you don't have access to that sort of equipment or sort of tools, I should say, maybe you do pay somebody or have somebody who does ask those questions, right? And we're not talking about it in exact science here when it comes to tracking tourism and hotel activity. You can be a reasonable estimate, right? Y'all are busy folks. These are busy folks, right? And so what we're going to look at is your methodology for determining tourism activity isn't reasonable, right? You're not just making up numbers, out of the sky here. You have some sort of a reason why you've concluded that you have this level of tourism activity. That's enough for the tax code purposes, right? As long as you have a reasonable estimate, that's generally just fine. But that's great if y'all are able to employ that and able to show the level of tourism activity.
What's a reasonable what can you do that you would think be reasonable?
I think so. It's going to depend a little bit on the type of activity or type of event that we're trying to track tourism activity for, right? So, maybe let's talk about a festival, right? We've got a festival that takes place in a particular area. It would not be reasonable for us to try and talk to every person attending that festival, right? But maybe we pick out a sample size. We think we've got a couple thousand people there. We talk to 20 people. We talk to 50 people, something along those lines, right? Trying to determine, hey, where are you coming from? Right, or we talk to some of the larger lodging properties in the area. If we can get on a good basis with them. Are you sending any folks, or have any of your visitors, have they mentioned that they're going to attend this? You're certainly gonna have better information and data about any sort of exhibitors you may have, right? That's gonna be extremely reliable information that you're gonna be able to provide to the county commissioners in your application, right? So if you have a festival, maybe we're looking at that. We've got they have a museum, right? They may have a visitor's log, right? And they're gonna ask folks, sign into our visitor's log, ask the question, you spend a night area hotel. But that's gonna be a pretty reasonable estimate. We're talking about the advertising category. The folks that we're buying the ads from should be able to provide us with some metrics and information about who's viewing those ads, right? So if we advertise, say maybe in a newspaper publication that distributes newspapers, around the state of Texas, they have different publications in different communities. We're going to ask them about what their typical circulation looks like, who their average reader is. And we're going to provide that information to the county commissioners with our application, right? We're funding a visitor information center. Well, that's easy, right? Well, easier anyway. We're going to be talking to these individuals who are calling or visiting our website or coming into our community, and we get some information about where they're coming from, hopefully. And we're also providing information about lodging in the area, and we're going to share that information with the county when we do our application, right? So again, the bottom line here is it doesn't have to be an exact science. It never will be. It's not going to be a hard count of folks, but it's going to be an estimate. As long as we can show how we reach that estimate, that's typically enough.
So if you have a log, you should say, where are you staying and where are you from?
Yeah, I would suggest that, and that's gonna help you too as well, right? Because as you're growing this activity over the years, as you're growing your festival or event, you may want to look at advertising in those markets. Oh, we sure get a lot of people, in from Killeen or wherever, right? Well, we're gonna want to advertise in that market a little bit harder next time because for whatever reason, we're drawing a lot of folks from that particular region. That's gonna help you as well. But yeah, that's exactly what you're gonna do. So that's the information you're gonna provide. And there's not a one-to-one return requirement or something else along those lines. There's not a particular return on investment standard that the county has put in place to apply for hotel tax funds, right? We know we're gonna spend a lot of hotel tax dollars to advertise and promote. We're not necessarily gonna see a one-to-one return. I wish we would, but we're not gonna see a one-to-one return necessarily for those dollars. That's okay. Right, but we do want to be able to show that we're using these dollars in a way that's effective as we can. Okay, yes, sure.
Last year during the award process, porta potties were denied for
Oh, sure.
events. What other items are just going to be denied out of hand for an event being put on?
Yeah, and I don't really remember why the porta potty discussion kind of got us far down the stretch as it did, but
They're expensive.
they're expensive. Guys, I'm glad you ran to. Okay, to keep in mind here, right? I'm giving you all the categories under the code, what's allowable and what's not allowable. So if we've got an event, let's just pick some sort of an event out of thin air. We've got an event, we want to put on some sort of a festival in the area, right? And we have costs associated with hosting that festival. Right, we've got security, we've got sanitary, sanitation requirements, right? Pay people to haul up the trash, gotta pay the porta potties, gotta pay, maybe law enforcement to come out there. We've got to pay people to come to set up the equipment, to clean it up after the fact, right? We've got these costs associated with holding our festival, right? Put those all in one stack, right? Because they're all of the costs associated with physically holding our festival. And then in a separate stack, we're going to have the costs associated with trying to get people to attend our festival, right? The advertising and promotion of our festival. We can assume, let's just assume, that this festival is going to be attended by people that are spending the 9 area lodging properties. Whether that's the sole reason why they came to Llano County to spend a night, or if they just happen to be here anyway, it's fine either way. Right, but we're going to pay for the costs associated with advertising and promoting the area with some sort of funding. Well, we know we can use hotel tax funds to advertise that festival, right? That's category 3. Advertising and conducting solicitations to attract tourists and hotel guests to the area, right? So we can advertise to our heart's content with hotel tax dollars for that festival. But then we still have this first stack of expenses, probably the bigger stack, right? These costs associated with hosting the festival. How can we pay for the costs of that festival? Well, we can use hotel tax dollars to pay for those costs provided that the festival itself fits within one of these categories. And so we're gonna have to think pretty hard about this festival and what aspects of this festival are going to qualify for hotel tax funds. Well, what type of festival are we holding? Is it a music festival? Well, a music festival will be pretty simple, pretty clearly within the arts category, right? Remember, arts can entail music, right? Can entail other forms of art as well, but if we're having a music festival, live music is going to be the category we're going to look at. So if we have a live music festival, we can pay for this big stack of money, including the porta potties, with hotel tax funds, right? The costs associated with hosting that festival, if it's an arts festival, can come from hotel tax funds. But what if it's a different type of festival? What if it's, remember we had the eclipse come through here, right? What if it's just a festival where we're all gonna go and admire the eclipse? Well, the eclipse doesn't fit within any of these categories, right? So the cost associated with hosting the eclipse itself doesn't fit within any of these 7 categories we're talking about here. Maybe various aspects of it do. Advertising, talked about that at length. Tired of talking about it. Maybe we have some live bands, but that's not the primary thing that's occurring at this festival. Well, then we could pay the cost associated with hosting the band, but all these other things associated with the festival, we got to find another category to fit it within. And we may not be able to fit it within any of these other categories. And I think that was the case with some of these porta potty expenses, and some of the county commissioners really latched onto that and they ran with it, and that's fine. They decide how the hotel tax funds are going to be spent in accordance with the law, and that's great. So that's, I think, where that conversation came in. So particularly if you are an event organizer, think about your event overall. Does your event in its entirety fit within one of these categories? If it does not, then we've got to think about the individual aspects of your event. What are some of the individual costs that your event is entailing that can fit within one of these categories? And let me talk about one. We'll take a question.
So, an air show.
An air show.
At the airport, would that fall into an arts category, a sporting event style category?
I would guess
Because there's performers.
there are performers. Okay.
It's a show.
It's a show. And usually for an air show, we have historic aircraft,
And.
vintage aircraft, right?
World War II era aircraft.
Oh, sure, okay. So, but there's, this is a great example, right? And let's talk about sporting events too, so we can hit that category as well, because you brought it up and I want to talk about it. That's where I was gonna go anyway. So one more category, sporting events, right? Another category is available. We can use hotel tax revenue for sporting events as long as there are substantial economic activity area hotels and the primary participants, right? The participants are tourists to the area, right? So, if we have a sporting event in which the majority of the people that are in a fishing tournament, for example, right? Sounds familiar. In a fishing tournament, the majority of the fishermen and fisherwomen are people from outside of the area. We can use hotel tax revenue to pay for the costs associated with holding that sporting event. Okay, so back to your question. We've got an air show. And our air show overall is going to entail a variety of different things associated with it. This is going to be a prime example of an event where we're going to look at the individual aspects and costs associated with that air show. And that's the portion, if it fits within the code, that can be funded with hotel tax revenue. Well, let's talk about maybe some of your big costs associated with it, right? Advertising, hit it, right? You use hotel tax revenue for that purpose. Put that aside. What about your other costs? You got all those other things I talked about, this other music festival, right? You got security, you got sanitation, you got, logistics, all of that. Can we use hotel tax revenue to fund those aspects of it? Well, we can look at your event and determine what portion of your event fits within one of the categories that's available. Historical restoration and preservation, sure, that's going to happen there, right? We got art, as you mentioned, right? Acrobatics and other types of art. You probably have some music there too. Who knows? You may have reenactors. Maybe that's the historical category as well. And we're going to determine what portion of your show, your air show, fits within these categories. What portion of your show could be categorized? I'm thinking probably the 3 categories are gonna be arts, historical, maybe sporting events. I don't really know, probably not so much that one, but certainly arts and historical, right? So if you determine, look, 75% of our show or air show involves artistic events and historical events. Well, the 75% of your costs associated with hosting that air show can come from hotel tax funds. The remaining 25% is going to have to come from somewhere else. I just made that number up, right? It could be 30%, it could be, doesn't matter, right? It could be any of those things. So that's how you're going to look at this type of event. And whether we're talking about an air show or some other type of festival, that's how we're going to determine whether or not we can use hotel tax revenue to cover those costs. Here, I mentioned fishing, right? This was a category that's been vitally important for this community. You put money into buying fish to stock the rivers for various fishing events. We're going to use the sporting event category, right? The majority of the participants are going to be tourists. It's going to have substantial economic area hotels. We're going to use hotel tax revenue to pay for fish for the river in order to host that fly fishing tournament as an example. Okay. Yes, sir.
One thing is,
Sure.
on a historic site, you have a historic building or a set of historic buildings and everything. And we have a heritage festival or to promote historic tourism. Would that fit into that category?
Yeah, I think so. By historical restoration and preservation, we assume that tourists and hotel guests are going to attend that, then yeah.
Or going to go just the attraction to the building, not the actual paint?
It could be a site or attraction that's visited by tourists and hotel guests. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, we'll do one more category to mention. Signage. You may use hotel tax revenue for wayfinding signage for sites and attractions that are visited by tourists and hotel guests. This is separate from the advertising category. So if you're thinking billboards, historic, site 1 mile ahead on the billboard, or visitor center 1 mile ahead. Okay, that's maybe we're doing the advertising, but we can also use hotel tax revenue for wayfinding signage, right? To attract people to a particular site or
Excuse me, a historical plaque or marker.
That's going to fit within the historical restoration and preservation. I don't think so, right? Because that plaque is giving you information about the historical artifact. But if we're a mile away and you need to get people to that historical marker, right? Your wayfinding signage may be vital.
So we could get signage saying that the Railroad Museum is here.
Exactly. That's exactly the type of wayfinding signage that we're talking about here. Well, or if we're talking about 50 miles down the road, maybe we're gonna have a billboard that's gonna say, when in Llano, visit our historic railroad museum. That's gonna be advertising category, right? So you're looking at maybe 3 different categories depending on what the sign is and what we're talking about.
Good, thank you.
Okay, so recap. We've got $1 of hotel tax money. We want to spend that dollar. You all want that dollar spent on the thing that's important to you. We've got to make sure that the thing we're going to spend that dollar on impacts tourism and the hotel and convention industry. We have this connection. 2, can we fit that expenditure into one of the categories we talked about here today? Convention centers and visitor information centers, the registration of convention delegates, advertising and promotion, arts related events and activities, historical restoration and preservation, sporting events in which the majority of the participants are tourists, and lastly, wayfinding signage. If we can fit the expenditure into one of those categories, you have a legal use of hotel tax revenue. So when you all submit your applications to the county, and one of the Cheryls forwards those applications to us to give it a legal review, we're going to give that application a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Hopefully, in your league, they're all thumbs up. And all we're scoring for, from our office's standpoint, is whether or not you've met this requirement, whether or not you can show a connection of hotel activity and it fits within one of the categories. We're not scoring for whether or not we think it's a good use of hotel tax revenue. I keep any of those opinions I may have in my back pocket. I never pull them out. That's not my job. I don't live in Llano County. I live in Travis County, right? But the county commissioners are going to be looking at that, and that's their job. So that's what you're going to want to look at. And to the extent you can show the maximum amount of tourism and hotel activity, and again, the county itself they're going to be more likely to fund your event, right? And so this is the point. This is why we're here. We want to make sure that your applications are in as good a shape as possible before we come to this county commissioners meeting. When is that meeting?
It,
on the back of the page, is, November the 12th.
November 12th. So we got a couple months to go. On my calendar.
but
So before we
applications,
come to that November 12th, and we all tap into this room and you know, we look at all of these applications, your application is in as good a shape as possible. I'll take any more questions you all may have, but then two, as you're going through the application process, if something occurs to you, don't hesitate to reach out to us as well. We're happy to answer these questions. You know, as you're going through the process, I don't know if our contact information is on there or not, but I'll be happy to give you my card or, you know, I know happy to hand it out as well. So don't hesitate to reach out to us. What other questions y'all have for me?
When you're spending more money than you get from the taxes, is there any advantage to select a category percentage wise and others do the spending it all on arts? Would it be better to spend some on the advertising category?
Well, that's gonna be a more of a policy question for what the county commissioners and judge decide that they wanna see for their dollars that they're spending. I will tell you that there's less of a preference on county spending than there is on city funding, right? And the reason why that is because cities have these caps associated and minimum expenditures associated with it, the county don't have to deal with. And so cities are going to be sensitive to, oh, you know, we have a 15% cap on the arts, 15%, a separate 15% cap on historical restoration and preservation. Once we've hit those limits, and we can't fund those activities in any further amount this fiscal year. So we're going to look at spending more hotel tax dollars on advertising for other types of things, right? So that's going to be a consideration. But for the county side, it's just going to be about what they feel, I think, is appropriate, what direction they want to see, what types of events they want to see in the county. I can't answer that question for them, but that's typically what we're going to see.
So do all cities have hotel motel tax?
Nearly all do. Typically, if a city has a hotel within it, they're going to have a hotel tax. All cities have the ability by city ordinance to impose up to a 7% hotel occupancy tax. Like I said, almost all of them with a hotel in the city have that city hotel tax. Counties need to go to the legislature and get permission from the legislature authority to have a hotel tax. A little less than half of the counties have gotten that authority.
So Horseshoe Bay have?
Yes, Horseshoe Bay's got its own hotel tax.
Okay, okay, I thought that couldn't happen.
The county tax may not apply within the city. Within
Yeah,
Horseshoe
I know. I think they I thought they made it.
I think there was some the resort owners, and I know remember back when what was the senator that used to be out here, he had an opinion about it, but I'm far as I know, I think they have a city hotel tax. I could be wrong about that.
they just started.
They just started that way. Yeah.
They wouldn't do it.
Yeah, and the county's tax, remember, the idea was
They don't have to have it.
they don't have to have a tax. Then what the remember it was a few years ago, but the big contention was before the city of Horseshoe Bay had a hotel tax, could the county hotel tax apply? And there was a limitation on that. So the county hotel tax wouldn't apply up there.
So, you mentioned something about yurts, are they taxable or not?
Typically not.
So it's
Typically,
like a tent?
Yeah.
basically, or-
that's the comptroller has taken the position that a yurt is a
Is that
tent.
some fancy yurts?
I know, with air conditioning and,
Yeah,
you know,
hardwood floors,
oh,
yeah.
I know.
And the tiny homes, as long as they're not on a trailer with wheels, they can be taxed,
You got it,
all right?
you got
Cause
it.
they're building tiny home
Yeah,
rental places all
oh,
over.
yeah. No, and I'll be in Brewster County next week, and that's the Big Bend area, and like Terlingua and stuff, that is like, it's crazy with the different structures. There was like somebody had built a plywood and, plexiglass, like, triangles all over the desert, you know, like, what is that? Is that a permanent building?
A TV with.
Yeah, and I said, well, you know what, they're not moving that thing anywhere, let's take the position that that's a hotel and let them challenge the county. So anyway, yeah, it's interesting, yeah.
But if it's canvas walls, then it's not.
Right, if it's canvas walls, I don't think so, right?
They're
So,
not permanent.
so- Yeah.
Get like the Indian, you can do it, if you can't.
yeah, that's what I told that judge out there, I was like, go ahead and do it, let them sue you, try and challenge it, so anyway, they went along with it. What other questions can we help y'all with? All right, well, I hope this was helpful. Thanks for coming from all across the county to attend. Again, I'm trying to streamline this for the meeting coming up in November. I'll be there and we're happy to answer any questions you all may have. So thanks for listening to me. Appreciate it. Okay, take care.
Cheryl, we do have applications up here.
I've got business cards.
It's online too, right?
And it is online, everything that you've heard is online.
Okay, sounds
And
good, sounds good, yeah.
Would you just repeat the amount available again, please?
Now,
Available total.
Okay.
Hey, Alan, I wanted to tell you, maybe,
Also let you know
I love that.
that last year, $795,000 was awarded for grants. This year, I only have 423,000 as of right now. So, don't
That's right.
angry. You can apply, I'm not discouraging for you to apply, but make sure that if you don't get it funded for the jobs last year, that you don't have.
Well.